you want to see the Democratic Party do over the next 5-10 years to win back not only the trust of the voters, but to start winning some general elections?
We can't be thinking election by election. We have to think deeper. We have to think more long term. But for me, that work that we do has to be grounded in a mission. And your mission is ultimately what your message is to people. And to me, it's very simple. It's 3 words: make life better. I think that is the whole mission of the Democratic Party. It's the reason I'm a Democrat. And frankly, I think it should be our message to voters that everything we are doing is about how we make life better for folks. I think that we must talk about how we make life better for the American worker.
So, Kate, who are we canceling today?
I thought it's high time that we cancel the old Democratic Party way.
Does that mean that Democrats might start winning?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but maybe it's time for a change.
Maybe they'll stop losing.
Perhaps. Hey everyone, I'm Katelyn Burns.
And I'm Christine Grimaldi.
And you're listening to Cancel Me Daddy,
the show where we take a closer look at all the panic around cancel culture.
with thoughtful analysis.
And verbal shitposting.
Well, Christine, I think we kicked over a hornet's nest over on Instagram.
We did. We
managed to piss off every single Catholic on that platform. What do you think?
I wonder how we came up in the algorithm for the Catholics.
Yeah, I was wondering about this too.
Was it the cosplaying?
Well, we haven't posted on Instagram a lot before, but since our Pope cosplay episode, we have been posting Instagram Reels almost every day, along with TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Blue Sky posts and all of that. We're really trying to ramp up our social media game. And out of all those platforms, good Lord, did we get a nasty response on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, everything from thinly veiled death threats to the, are you even Catholic? Or were you just raised Catholic? Well, first of all, it was the Catholic childhood trauma episode.
Yeah, no, we're like potato and spaghetti Catholics over here, please.
Yeah, but, yes, I did go to Mass every week. Yes, I sang at Mass every week.
Yeah, those comments were wild. There was not a lot of grace given to us. I think people didn't really understand what the podcast was all about and the fact that we're coming at this from a left perspective. But the one that crossed the line for me was the Deus Vult Crusader meme that guy posted.
That was scary when you texted that to me, yes.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Deus Vult means God wills it. And it is literally the rallying cry of the Crusades. The meme was a crusader striking his sword at us. That was not very fun, but we are back again. No meme can keep us down.
That is true. And I think that we had a very insightful discussion.
Yeah, we have a very exciting interview with Democratic National Committee Vice Chair Malcolm Kenyatta. He was the first openly LGBTQ state rep in Pennsylvania history, recently elected as Vice Chair of the Democratic Party. And he has a lot of thoughts about not only a recent controversy with the party vote for his own position, but with where he wants to see the Democratic Party going forward.
And we would like to see it go somewhere, because it seems to have really stalled out, especially after the results of the last election.
Yeah, let's get into the interview. Joining us now is Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. He was the first openly LGBTQ person of color elected to the Pennsylvania State House. He was recently voted Vice Chair of the Democratic National Committee. Malcolm, thank you for joining us.
I'm so happy to. Thank you so much for having me.
So we wanted to have you on because there's been some, I think, interesting machinations within the Democratic Party that we wanted to sort of unpack with you. And then we wanted to get your ideas for where the Democratic Party should go next as a political party. But first I wanted to get to the sort of, I don't know if you want to call it drama around the vote for your position as vice chair. But recently, it's my understanding that there was a subcommittee that voted to, I don't know if vacate the voting is the right term to use, but basically nullify your election and redo it because of some rules stuff going on. And now it's going to, I think, the full DNC for a vote. Can you just give us sort of the TLDR of what's happening with the vote for your position?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me reiterate how excited I am to be with you all.
This is our second attempt at recording this. We had some technical difficulties yesterday that basically ruined my whole day. So thank you for coming back. We really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Listeners, the three of us just want to keep talking. That's really what it's about. So it's totally fine. You know, it has been described as drama, and I've been saying this not because I'm not happy to be with you, but on like the least interesting topic to the average person. But obviously, some of these internal machinations have downstream electoral impacts, and that is why we must talk about it. And to me, I've been making this point that the truth is immovable, but the truth also doesn't defend itself. And it requires other people to defend it and to stand up for it and to stand beside it. And that has been my purpose in this whole conversation, to provide people with real context of what's going on and to put ourselves in a position where we can be frustrated by internal weird procedural stuff. But a part of what has opened up this debate and more of the public discourse is that I feel like people have added things in that are completely unnecessary. Even if your end goal is to be frustrated at the Democratic Party, we don't have to create frustrations. We can just live with the frustrations that exist. To that end, on February the 28th, a couple of weeks after the election, one of the people who was running for vice chair as well, who was unsuccessful, filed a challenge to that race. And it has been misconstrued that the challenge is about gender or these other things. It's really not. It was a procedural challenge where she effectively argued that the final two vice chair positions, which we were initially voting for one at a time, delegates of the DNC, after being there for like hours, wanted to vote for two at a time, basically. And she's saying that that violated Robert's Rules of Order. That Robert's Rules of Order, which is for people who've taken high school civics or student government, it is the process by which the DNC, state government, Congress, anybody who has, you know, fancy meetings, it's the rules that we all sort of abide by on how meetings should be run. However, the contention here, and the argument of my lawyers and others, is that even within that Robert's Rules framework, the group that you're in, the group of people who's in the meeting, can always decide to override those rules to do what they want to do, which makes the meeting move more effectively. And that's what people did. We were in a position where the top three people who won, Artie Blanco, myself, and David Hogg, we were the people who led in every single ballot. And so the will of the voters was clearly represented in the end, but she had the right to file a challenge because in the Democratic Party, we actually do believe in due process. And so we went through that process. Her challenge was, you know, successful. And the committee, the credentials committee, which oversaw this challenge, or heard this challenge rather, effectively said that we have what they are calling, under Robert's Rules of Order, an unfinished election, meaning that they are requiring that we hold the election for the two open positions with the five people who were there already. Now, does this frustrate me? Heck yes. But the issue has been that there have been people who've used this to suggest that this exists as a way to like get David Hogg, which is just couldn't be further from the truth.
Okay, yeah. So you have David Hogg running around saying, I am supporting primary challenges to already elected Democrats, and this is the DNC trying to force me out of this position that I won. But what you're actually saying is that there was a challenge that was lodged way before all of this to the procedural order. So Hogg essentially is trying to drum up support and controversy by not being truthful. Is that how I'm interpreting things?
I had this, and I'm going to bring it again for folks, okay? I have this handy-dandy timeline, which is so important. So I mentioned February 28th, the election challenge was filed. There's been a big conversation about whether or not DNC leadership should put our fingers on the scale and try to dictate the outcomes of elections, or whether or not we should stay the hell out of it and let voters choose. The chairman announced that on March the 25th, along with a whole other series of pro-democracy reforms, democratizing the DNC. And so it wasn't until April 16th that David said he wasn't going to abide by that. And David has taken these two events, which occurred months before what he decided to do, and said that these two events are an attempt to respond to this thing. And that's just not how like a calendar works. It's not how reality works. And it's really frustrating that like we can't have a conversation about how the DNC should be better. We can't have a real conversation about this challenge itself, which I think is like an unfair challenge because everything is being neatly packaged into this box of David is doing this thing that some people are upset with. Therefore, anything that is done, is of course retaliation. And I get how that's a neat story, a neat, easy narrative, but just not true. And David knows it's not true. And when he put out a press release suggesting that it was true, it forced me to finally respond after weeks of not saying anything about what he's been.
Do you feel like there's pressure on the Democratic Party as a whole to especially button up and follow procedure here, given how the presidential election went last year when President Biden dropped out and they substituted in Kamala Harris? And I know that a lot of Democratic voters in particular, wanted there to be more procedure around that action. Do you feel like the party's under pressure at all to make sure that they're buttoned up on the rules front here?
No, I really don't think that that's it either. I think that this is really connected to first and foremost, who our new chair is, who most people don't know. But Ken Martin is our new chair. He has been doing, I think, really hard work to reform the party. And for folks who followed what happened in 2016, Ken, who was a former staffer of the progressive line of the Senate, Paul Wellstone, was the person who helped lead the effort to reform the DNC after there were a lot of questions about impartiality in 2016 around superdelegates and other things. And so for over a decade now, Ken has been talking about big rules changes that should happen at the DNC, including codifying neutrality. He talked about it throughout the many forums that were held for chair that like no person with Netflix insanity like was, but this is something that I think anybody who looks at our institutions, we understand that there are a lot of questions, not just about the Democratic Party as an institution, but people have a lack of faith in institutions in general. And I think a way you rebuild that faith is to put the power back in the hands of people, to not wag your finger and say, we know better. And right now, there are some people who are more progressively minded who say, well, he seems to be for the people we're for, so we're for him doing this. But I would tell people, be careful what you ask for, because there could be in 4 years a DNC vice chair who has a much different philosophy, who believes the party should go in a much more conservative vision, for example, and who says, well, I'm going to open up a PAC and primary people who I think are too far to the left. And I think there would be an uproar about that. And so what I think is, even if I agree with some of David's contention philosophically, and I do agree philosophically. That's not the point. The point is whether or not we can survive, and in fact, whether or not we would thrive as a party if just 10 people, literally we're talking about 10 people, would say that we are not going to weigh in and we are going to allow voters to choose. There are enough voters. We see it in polls. People are upset. People want us to fight harder. I think there are a lot of things that we can talk about today that we are doing to meet this moment, to reform this party, to be a strong party that can beat back Donald Trump. However, we don't need to come into every state and tell voters who their member of Congress is. What we should do as the DNC is to make sure the choices of Democratic primary voters are not only respected, but that then we put all of our resources behind helping them beat Republicans, which is why I'm in this role.
I was hoping that you could actually break down like the neutrality pledge for our listeners and kind of like what you said, the implications of it if that fell into the hands of a different faction of the Democratic Party.
So after 2016, there were a lot of feelings, or it's, people can argue it's real or not. I'm not here to relitigate that argument. I wasn't even in elected office in 2016, okay? But the point is, there was at least a perception that the Democratic Party leadership was not fair in terms of managing that primary process, which is one of the big jobs we have at the DNC, is to, manage the presidential primary process. The DNC, contrary to popular belief, does not manage the primary process as it relates to, state or local offices, but we do have a big say in planning the debates, deciding who gets on the stage, the delegate selection process. All of that happens for the president at the DNC. And there was a perception after 2016 that people were putting their fingers on the scale for their favorite candidate. And out of that came an uproar for folks to see the DNC to be positioned in a way where we're putting power in the hands of voters. I agree with that. And so there's been a bylaw that was passed that said we aren't going to weigh in presidential primaries, I think in 2017. Chair Martin was clear throughout his run for chair that he wanted to extend that bylaw to say we would not weigh in on any races. Numerous state parties, actually, Democratic state parties actually do that. And again, because this is complex, a lot of people's eyes glaze over and they don't understand the nuance, but the DNC does not run the state parties. The state parties are separate entities that have membership within the DNC, but numerous state parties also did that, including Minnesota, where Ken is from, that the party does not weigh in on primaries. And I think there's a good reason for that. I think people are sick of the perception or the reality that there's smoke-filled back rooms where people decide who the nominees are going to be, based on their view of the world, instead of having a truly democratic process where voters decide who they want the nominees to be, and then the party infrastructure is mobilized to support that result. And I think that's what we ought to do.
Well, thank you for breaking that down, because I feel like that is something that maybe the general public doesn't understand. And even like us as, congressional reporters, it's a whole other procedural bag.
It is. It truly is. And we're dealing with it every day. But to just end this point, I will just say that I am not against robust primaries. And I've said this in multiple interviews. The DNC can't be an incumbent protection racket, okay? I'm not here to defend any incumbents. I'm not here to say people who want to run in a primary shouldn't run. One of the first events I did, I think the first event I did after I was elected, was in my personal capacity, but I went and did an event for Run for Something, a virtual event for people who were signing up to run for office, young people specifically who are signing up to run for office. That is important. I mean, I literally have a whole documentary that you can go watch right now on Apple TV called Don't Wait Your Turn, about my run for U.S. Senate against John Fetterman. So, I have a real record, not just in supporting my own campaigns, but in supporting other young candidates in my generation and folks coming behind me, because I understand the power of us giving voters choices and of putting forward, a serious view of what the ideas that should drive this party should be, and having voters sort of dictate that. But once you're in this specific role that I'm in, I can't be doing that. And I think it's been conflated that, people want that us in Democratic leadership want leaders we deserve to stop doing what they're doing. Leaders we deserve can do whatever they want to do. Just like Emily's List works to elect women, and Victory Fund works to elect LGBTQ folks, and Collective PAC does that for Black candidates. That means in some instances, they're going to be running against incumbents. And nobody here is trying to shut down those organizations. In fact, they are an important part of the Democratic Party ecosystem. But it's their job to do that and weigh in the primary space. It's not even that it's our job or not our job. It creates a really nasty precedent that I don't think we should repeat.
Yeah, can you explain exactly what the vice chair role is within the Democratic Party?
So, I've often joked that if you have a favorite person on Jeopardy,
the smile on your face. Yeah.
That's right. That stumps them and kicks them off the show. Asking somebody who the last vice chair of the Democratic Party would be that question. That gets them kicked off immediately. But to your question, it really has ranged. You've had vice chairs who've done a lot, like Donna Brazile, who was interim chair of the party on 2 different occasions. She was a very involved vice chair who a lot of people I think still know. And then you've had vice chairs who haven't done much. So it's really ranged over the years. I've been a vice chair who I think has done quite a bit. In 111 days, I guess it's been. I've been to 8 states. It was supposed to be 9, but Sean Duffy is not doing his job as transportation secretary. So my plane to New Hampshire was canceled the other day. But nevertheless, I've been to 8 states, done 3 dozen events, fundraisers, town halls, and been working on the boring stuff inside the party in terms of, hiring and all these different things that we need to do to build out the infrastructure for us to take our message to reach everybody who needs to hear it, which is everybody. And so that's the work that I've been doing. And For me, even though it is a job where I do not get paid, I'm a complete volunteer. It's a job that was very important for me to possibly take on. Before I ever ran for office, I had run a citywide campaign here on the staff side in Philadelphia. One of the youngest people to ever do that. I then ran for state representative, as I mentioned, ran for U.S. Senate. So I've run statewide, I've run federally, I've run at the state level. I ran a campaign at the local level. And so I felt like I wanted to shake the party out of this mindset where we exist to just elect a president every 4 years, and to get us focused on the fact that there are elections every 6 months here in Pennsylvania for something, and that there are people who are running for positions that don't get the attention, but the impact of what they do is deeply pronounced, from your mayor to your state rep to your, county commissioner. And I wanted a Democratic Party that fights just as hard for county commissioners as we do for members of Congress. And that's the work that I've been trying to do to get us refocused on and looking local first.
Well, Malcolm, we have something in common. We also don't get paid for this, so
we hope to.
That's why everybody listening should go subscribe to our Patreon. We didn't just want to go over what's happening with your vice chair position, but we also wanted to get your vision for the future of the Democratic Party. I don't think it's a secret to anybody that this is a low point for the party, at least in recent years. In my memory, it's been a while since Democrats haven't had some control over either one of the branches of Congress or the White House. And certainly, I'm a trans person. I understand the state of the world at the state house level across the states and how much Republican control there is. So my question to you is, what do you want to see the Democratic Party do over the next 5-10 years to win back not only the trust of the voters, but to start winning some general elections again?
Thank you for saying that. And thank you for saying in particular, what we do over the next 5-10 years, because we are, right now engaged in a strategic plan, thinking through exactly that, because we can't be thinking election by election. We have to think deeper. We have to think more long term. But for me, that work that we do has to be grounded in a mission. And your mission is ultimately what your message is to people, because your message is just reiterating what your mission is. And to me, it's very simple. It's 3 words: make life better. I think that is the whole mission of the Democratic Party. It's the reason I'm a Democrat. And frankly, I think it should be our message to voters that everything we are doing is about how we make life better for folks. I think that we must talk about how we make life better for the American worker. To me, that looks like passing the PRO Act. So it's as easy as possible for people to join a union, to advocate and to negotiate for higher wages, for better benefits. I think we need to give people a raise by raising the minimum wage to at least $15. And that not only helps people who aren't making minimum wage currently, but it also raises the floor for everybody else and lifts the ceiling. I think that we need to make life better for our young families. That means giving people the ability to buy that home, building more homes in the first place so that there are homes to buy, and also putting people in a position that if you want to start or expand a family, that you can do so because you can afford it, because childcare is manageable and affordable, because you have paid family leave. Doing all of those things measurably, materially makes people's lives better. And I'll make one final point about our seniors. Right now we see the Republican Party who is doing everything they can to try to rip away Medicare and Medicaid, which helps, so many children, millions of people across this country. And by the Congressional Budget Office analysis, that's the nonpartisan folks who review bills, as you all know very well, they're saying at least 14 million people will lose health care under this Republican budget that they're negotiating. And if they have their way with trying to privatize Social Security, you have a lot of seniors, a lot of disabled folks, a lot of young people who are at real risk. And so it doesn't make their life better to rip away these supports that Democrats have worked to build over the modern era. And it's our job to fight back. But we're not just fighting back because we hate Republicans. We're fighting back because the things they're doing would make life worse for people. And our mission, as I said, is to make life better.
I think that, Kate made a really salient point about, we want to win elections and we want to win back voters. I want to know how bodily autonomy, how trans rights, how abortion rights, how rights for disabled people fit into all of this. Because I have to say, this kind of, whether you want to call it machinations or, kind of manufactured drama aside, David Hogg went on Bill Maher the other day, and I about lost my mind when he said that we need to win back young men who want to get laid, when I feel like there are so many rights of people on the line that we are kind of living at the expense of the young men who want to get laid. Like, for instance, how would one get an abortion if one needed one after being with the young man who needed to be laid? So I think, but I really like, as much as I kind of, a little facetious about that, I'm kind of thinking, who is a Democratic voter, or who are the people who could be Democratic voters, and how can you all get them without pandering to kind of like this imaginary, I don't know, like cis white man.
Dude, bro.
Yeah, dude, bro, who like leaves us all behind with our rights and like our futures.
I think a part of how we do it is by, talking about what Dr. King called the beloved community. And here's what I mean by that. When one person's rights are at risk, when the basic American idea of freedom is at risk, if it's not your rights that are being targeted right now, history is a guide, and it will tell you that your rights will be targeted next. People who want to be in a position where they make all of the decisions for all of us, a small group of people who get to go and make all the decisions of all of us. A part of the way they sort of orient us to that idea is by creating a problem that is not really a problem, that only they can solve, to prove how big and tough they are. When you have a group of people, my dear friend Sarah McBride said something the other day when we were talking. She said, when you have a group of people who want to target the smallest group, in this instance, a lot of attacks against trans folks right now, a small group in terms of population, and particularly a small group in terms of the specific entry point into the conversation, which has been sports, it is because they have no ability to solve the actual problems that exist in your life, but also because they want to pick your pocket. If we can have everybody arguing over here about this thing that's not a real thing, then it allows them to get away with ripping away things that are real fundamental rights. One of those fundamental rights is the right to choose what the hell to do with your own body without people needing to get into a room and debate it. And I say to people who, don't understand why this is such a big deal, I really am happy. And I don't mean this, tongue in cheek. I'm truly happy that you have never had to wait on the edge of your seat to see if the Supreme Court is going to uphold or rip away something that is fundamental to you. I'm happy that you don't know what that feels like. But I don't want anybody in this country to know what it feels like. I don't want anybody in this country to be waiting for a couple of unelected judges sitting high and mighty to determine whether or not they can live with the freedom that America's really built on. I love the title of your podcast, in part because I think, as we've had this conversation about cancel culture, a part of what people are bucking up against, right, is this idea that I should be free to say what I think, that the government should not be trying to dictate what I think. I also think the government should be trying to dictate what you say and what you do, and certainly what you do with your body. And so we're in a position right now where people are rhetorically asking, who are the Democrats willing to throw to the quote unquote altar of electability? And I would just ask them, who should we give up? Who is worth throwing away? I want this coalition to be a coalition that includes everybody. And I mean that genuinely. And this idea that we can make life better for folks, we can make life better for everybody without making anybody's life worse. This country is big enough to do that. And we have to have leaders that remind us of that, not leaders who look for the easy target in their mind to try to pick on and bully people to build themselves up. I think enough of that bullshit.
I think that is the attitude that you're seeing both within the DNC and then, among Democrats that you interact with who are running for office, like you said, in Pennsylvania every 6 months.
I think the best political ad I've seen so far this year is by the new mayor of Omaha, Nebraska. And if you all don't know, Democrats just flipped the mayoral seat in Omaha, Nebraska in a very big upset.
I actually wrote about that on my Patreon if our listeners want to read
Oh,
more about that campaign.
People, no, really, people really should go read it. And I'm sure you talk about it in the piece. But one of the ads was, and I'm forgetting the name of the current Republican mayor, but the Democrat who won basically put out an ad with her like peeking under a bathroom stall, and it says like she's worried about bathrooms, I'm worried about fixing potholes, and I love that, and I think it was so effective. And I can tell you that at least for the leadership of the DNC. Ken has been very clear. I've been very clear. Our other folks on our leadership team have been very clear. We're not throwing anybody away. We are a party that's about building the biggest coalition, but that doesn't mean we have to have unanimity of thought. We do have to have unanimity of purpose and being focused on making people's lives better, but we don't have to be the same person. And so to your point of, is that what I hear everywhere? No, I hear Democrats who have complicated thoughts on a variety of different issues, who don't agree with me on every single thing. And it is not my desire that they do. I do hope, though, that there is no disagreement that every single person in this country ought to be treated with dignity, decency, and respect. And we can't just verbalize that, but that has to be effectuated in our policy.
Kate, when you, well, actually, no, Malcolm, you mentioned Omaha, and then Kate, you chimed in.
Yes.
Do you want the deepest cut?
Yes.
From my years of abortion reporting was when Heath Mello, a name I will never forget, ran for the mayor of Omaha, Nebraska, very vocally anti-abortion, and Bernie Sanders supported him because, we needed to have a big tent on abortion, but nothing else, without this recognition that abortion and bodily autonomy is so integral to economic justice, to the ability to plan your future. So to hear that, that's kind of like gone the other way in Omaha, to hear how profound that ad is just really encouraging. And I think a sign that, and I would hope that this would be the case from, whether it's Bernie Sanders or anybody from the left, that we're not sacrificing any one thing, like you said, that we are all in this kind of very broad way entitled to all parts of ourselves, being treated with dignity and respect.
I was going to say that ad reminded me a lot of Danica Roem's initial run for the Virginia House of Delegates.
My transportation and infrastructure queen?
Yes, because I remember I interviewed her 4 or 5 times that cycle. And even after she won office, you could not get her to stop talking about Route 28. I don't even live in her district. I've never lived in her district. I think I've been in her district a handful of times. I know so much about Route 28 just from talking with her. And her opponent tried to attack her on the basis of her identity. And I thought that was such a great example for how Democrats can talk about trans rights, because I think there is a reticence to talk about that. And I appreciate your willingness also, Malcolm, to talk about this. This podcast was founded by 2 trans people. It was me and my original co-host, Oliver Ash Klein, who ran this podcast for a couple of years together before Oliver left and Christine came on board.
And it is an honor to just be invited here.
So we have a larger than average trans listenership, I would say, than your average podcast. We might have the transiest audience of any podcast, although I think gender reveal gives us a run for our money. So we do appreciate your willingness to talk about this with us, because I know that not every Democrat wants to be talking about these issues right now.
To me, it's not really complex or hard. I mean, at its core, there are people who want us to believe that the way we make life better for them and the way that, we make this country great is that we have to sacrifice our neighbors, that we have to look at our neighbors with a caustic, suspicious eye. I think that, to me, this is really simple. If government is not making your life better, they ought to leave you the fuck alone. Just leave you the fuck alone. It's not hard for me.
And of course, this isn't an issue that I think will connect with every voter, but I know that trans people appreciate hearing it. But what do you say to those who accuse the Democratic Party of not caring for the average American as much as they maybe should?
I think that that's wrong. I think that certainly, with a party that's this big, it is very easy to find some influencer online who says they're a Democrat and then ascribe their views to the broader party. It's very easy to find a politician that makes a vote that you don't like and ascribe that to the full, Democratic Party. But what I would say to people is, if you want things to change, you also have to allow things to change. I've only been here 110 days, I think I mentioned. And I mentioned how we have Ken Martin, who, helped lead the party overhaul and reform efforts. I think my election and David's election is a reflection of a Democratic Party that also recognized we need to elect younger people to serve in leadership of our party. And we elected, a Latina. We elected a Black woman. We elected a young Black gay man, a woman, an older man, a young white guy. We elected, if you look at our party leadership, it reflects the country. And I think a part of what that means is that, certainly we're going to reflect some of the debates that people are having. But I do think what we all do every single day is try to move the needle in a direction that makes life better for folks. And I just would make this point that I've been making a lot as well. I do think the Democratic Party is self-reflective. I do think any challenge issue that exists in the party, I promise you, somebody has written an op-ed about it in the New York Times or Washington Post, wherever the hell else. It has been written. The Democrats suck in this way. The Democrats suck in that way. And then you have people who get, wall-to-wall
I've written a
coverage.
few of them.
And that's totally fine. And probably based on what you said, it could totally fair. But I make this point that, going on TV by itself or wherever and saying we suck doesn't change anything, actually. But in this media environment, I think there is a real incentive to go and crap on Democrats. I mean, I think beyond baseball, I think the American pastime is like crapping on Democrats. And we get involved in it as well, when I think we ought to stand up for ourselves. I mean, as we're having this conversation, the U.S. credit rating was just downgraded for the first time in whatever, and it has barely been discussed. The Democrats, the last 4 years, led the single strongest recovery out of COVID of any country in the world, and people want us to somehow apologize for that. I made this point when I was running for DNC vice chair. I'm not going to spend 4 years apologizing for being a Democrat. Yes, we have our crap, but I am not spending all day, engaging in the same sort of iteration of, kick down on the Democrats. I don't think it helps us address the real issues we have. And frankly, some of the arguments I think aren't fair.
You mentioned the media and the media environment facing Democrats right now. And I am first and foremost a media critic, and I think there's a lot of issues with how politics are being covered these days. How are you as the Democratic Party countering this media environment that we're in right now that seems to let, Donald Trump off the hook for everything while also bashing Democrats?
You know what? I think part of it is you go everywhere, right? You don't abandon these spaces, no matter how unfair, I think the coverage is. I mean, I was literally on Fox News yesterday. Mainly, they wanted to talk about the internal Democratic, machinations, but I obviously used that opportunity to talk about the fact that in the middle of the night, Republicans are ripping away healthcare to pass on that money to billionaires, to try to make sure there's some people who, know that. And literally while I'm sitting here talking to you, I have some incredible fans that are calling me, cunts and other beautiful language. I'm getting the alert here. I get
not the reclaimed kind.
No, not the reclaimed kind. I get some beautiful, messages, some that I posted on my social media.
Our Instagram comments.
Yeah, you should see our Instagram right now.
But anyway, all that to make the point that, you go everywhere. That's the first thing. But the second thing is to recognize that legacy media is not how the voters who we need to reach are necessarily getting their news in the first place. And so we have to go to where they are and communicate in the ways that they want to communicate and reach them in ways that make sense to and for them. And so when I talked about some of the boring things that we're doing on the back end, we are building out the infrastructure and hiring, I think, some top tier talent to help us take our message everywhere. I mean, we are working to ensure that every single day, we are arming people with the truth and facts to rebut what Donald Trump is doing. We set up the People's Cabinet to have experts who can respond to the craziness that comes out of this administration with facts. We're doing a daily response now to the press secretary's press briefing. We invested $1 million a month into state parties so that state parties have the resources to do year-round organizing. So when we talk to people, the first conversation we're having is not vote for this candidate, but is to ask them, hey, what can we be doing to make your life better? So that is what I think we need to do as a party. Organize year-round. Take no election for granted. Reach people wherever they are. And yes, engage with the legacy media that I often think is not fair, but also engage with people directly where they are on the platforms that they enjoy.
Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us today. How can our listeners keep up with your work and continue to follow you after this?
So you can follow me at Malcolm Kenyatta wherever. 2 L's in Malcolm, by the way, 2 T's in Kenyatta.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Christine, guess what?
What, Kate?
We actually have our first sponsor.
This is very exciting.
Do you want to know who it is?
I would love to.
It is Nora Reed Designs.
I think this is even more exciting because this is a listener.
Yes, a listener and somebody who I go way back with on Twitter, actually. I think we've been mutuals now for almost 10 years, and they make amazing jewelry. For those of you on YouTube, we're scrolling through the website now, but you can see it's all colorful glass in friendly and round shapes, and they have an extensive Pride jewelry collection that they sell year-round, not just in June.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is especially the time to support small artisan-run businesses.
I think it's just them and their husband.
Oh, that's awesome. And like the jewelry is so beautiful. You have to have real skill to make something in a kiln.
Yeah, it's handmade fused glass jewelry, which I think is amazing. Mm-hmm. I haven't worn a lot of jewelry since the pandemic, but I think this is maybe my way back in.
Yeah, I think so too. I scroll back up to that like heart glass. It's like
which one here?
This one? Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's really good. I liked the bolo tie that's in trans pride colors.
That's beautiful.
Isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The jewelry comes in a variety of lengths for pendants, so you can get jewelry that fits any body, not just one body, which is really good for me because I'm super tall and all of my necklaces are like chokers.
Yeah, that's really important to have like a variety and to accommodate everybody.
They also sell game tokens and bookmarks, and everything comes in a beautiful little paper box, so that makes it extremely giftable.
And where can we find Nora Reed Designs?
Nora.jewelry.
That's a cool website name. I didn't know you could get .jewelry.
Yeah, Nora.jewelry is
check it out.
Really easy to remember, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, Christine, we haven't done this in a while. Are you ready for some out of context cancellations?
I've really missed them. Really feel like canceling some shit on this Monday.
Oh my God, it's been such an awful day.
Yeah, so let's cancel shit. I don't care what it is as long as we're canceling it, which I guess goes to the whole out of context thing.
Okay, this first one is specifically for you, by the way.
Yeah, I noticed.
We are canceling the New Jersey Turnpike for sending our listener a bill when they haven't driven on the Turnpike in years.
I empathize with you. I make no apologies for the New Jersey Turnpike. I can apologize for other things on New Jersey's behalf, but not the Turnpike.
We're going to cancel creepy bigots who stare at you when you're shopping.
What the fuck?
Yeah, that's no fun. No. Okay, this one's kind of funny given the horrible news that we got earlier this week, but cancel everyone talking about Biden's age 8 months after he lost the election. Now, I will say, we do have to add a little bit of context to this out of context cancellation. This request came in before former President Biden came public with his prostate cancer diagnosis. So I can see a reason now for the media talking about his age and health. Now compared to when our listener sent this in.
This is kind of my conjecture, but I think it's the rehashing of the election that everyone is just so tired of, including you, dear listener.
Yeah, and also like we're obsessing over Biden's age, but also we have like a senile person in office right now.
I was gonna,
and we're not getting coverage of that.
Megalomaniacal. I don't know what to call Donald Trump.
Sociopath.
Yeah, that works.
I mean, I think you have to be a sociopath to even want to be president.
Didn't we talk about this before? Like, there has to be like some level of that.
I feel like we haven't talked about it on the show, but it's come up when we're like drinking and hanging out.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Moving on, we're going to cancel nor'easters in May.
I'd ask where you live, but that would be context.
You know what a nor'easter is, right?
Yes.
Of course you do. You're from New York, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't get a ton of them, though. I think that's more of a New England thing.
It's more of a New England thing.
Yeah.
We definitely had one overnight last night. Thankfully, no snow, but the rain and the wind was pretty nasty.
That's wild.
We are canceling high-stakes testing and state standardized testing.
Oh, absolutely. Just the thought of it makes my skin crawl.
Earlier this year, I got to write for the MSNBC Election Day blog about the death of the MCAS, which is the Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment.
Yeah.
Something or other. And they implemented that when I was in high school, and they finally killed it this year. And so that was a special treat to write about that, because my high school was like the first one to protest against that.
What is it supposed to tell you or say about you? It
was a graduation requirement. It was like making sure that the schools are teaching everything that they needed to.
Well, these days the schools are being told not to teach certain things. So I'm glad that they got rid of the that assessment in Massachusetts. And I hope that more assessments will go.
This one is so out of context that even I don't know what it is, but we're canceling conflict goblins.
Maybe people who like to cause conflict?
Maybe. Perhaps.
What
a great turn of phrase.
It is really good.
Yeah.
It sounds like something like really for Cancel Me Daddy. So thank you for submitting that.
And lastly, we're canceling perimenopause.
I would concur. I don't know that I have reached it yet, but apparently I'm in this like very weird stage of like still having reproductive years and perhaps the ability to bear another child. And also you can be in perimenopause at the same time.
Oh, no.
This sounds like a confluence that is really going to be a bitch of hormones and not good for the skin or the bod.
You say confluence, I say conclave, and all of a sudden I'm back to the horrific trauma of getting harassed on Instagram all week.
That did suck. I will say, though, I thought it was a really good conversation.
That we had, yes.
Yeah, no, not the guy or whoever said that's why they used to burn him at the stake. So, no, not that.
That one was good. Yeah, I liked that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I reported it, but I don't
saw
know
Instagram
what
take no action on that one.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we're just going to keep trucking along here at Cancel Me Daddy, straight into perimenopause.
If you'd like to submit your own out-of-context cancellation, you can do so on our Discord server, which you can access now at the $3 level on our Patreon. I have reworked our tiers, and we have a new $5 reward, and that is a monthly subscriber-only live stream that we're going to be doing. Although I don't know if we're going to be able to do one this month because we both have really busy schedules between recording episodes and some travel that we have upcoming. But we do have some reworked perks on Patreon. It's worth checking out. And also, I'd like to say that we've decided that I think all of our episodes, or most of our episodes, are going to end up on YouTube as well. I've been teaching myself how to edit video, so if you don't like how it's edited, too bad. I'm a beginner. Give me a break. And follow us on Instagram and TikTok if you use those platforms as well.
Yeah, we would love more positive comment.
And more subscribers. Cancel Me Daddy is a Flytrap media production, and today's show is made by me, Katelyn Burns, my incredible co-host, Christine Grimaldi, and our amazing editor, Maria Paleologos.
Steve Peter Schmidt made our theme song, and Romy Tirico designed our graphics. Ads by Multitude Productions.
Our show is made possible by the incredible cancelers supporting our work, especially the member of our Canceler Hall of Fame, with the great power to cancel all of their enemies, Meg.
We appreciate your support.
Happy canceling!